Accustomed as I am to speaking, I have a good story like a good song stands up to re-singing and retelling. And what I'd like to do today is tell the same story that we just heard in the gospel, just spun a little differently. But the message is one in one. I think at times when people attempt to understand the handwork of God and apply it to their own craft, sometimes his hand guides theirs. And I think this may be the case. And this is how the story begins. Once, long ago, there were brothers who lived across the street from one another, long, long ago in a village. On one side, there was a poor brother, had very little, lived in a simple cabin, he and his wife, and they had but the clothes on their back and just enough. Now, on the other side of the street lived a rich brother, a magnificent home, a wonderful pathway leading up, gardens. Now, the rich brother was envious of others. Now, the poor brother had one thing his brother didn't, and that was contentment for what simple bits he had. And so in that fashion, the poor brother had more than the rich. There was a time when the good saints would come and visit, walk about this orb. And one day, St. Nicholas decided to come and walk about, come down to earth, and just visit and look and see how all was going. And so he did. He dressed in a simple peasant's garb and came and wandered about. He wandered and trod along the dirt roads, and at the end of the day, sure enough, where did he find himself but dusty and tired and hungry, and standing there on that path between the rich brother and the poor brother's house. And he decided it was time to rest, and he needed a little bit of water and food, and maybe shelter. So he walked over to the rich brother's house and the door flung open, and a very busy man in his good dress attire stood there and said, "I'm a busy man, I'm working here on my accounts. What is it you wish?" And St. Nicholas, who was dusty and dirty and tired, took a minute to get his mouth in order, and even before he could speak, the rich man looked out and said, "You're just a common wanderer. You've come here for food." And St. Nicholas nodded. And the rich brother said, "For food and shelter for the night." Nicholas nodded his head. He says, "I work hard to provide for myself and my family, and what do you do but wander? Lazy." Boom! Shut the door. He opened it up just a crack and said, "Oh, if you wish something common, perchance across the way." And so St. Nicholas just stood there somewhat astounded and amazed, and wandered across the street again, tired and hungry, and the door flew open. And there, the poor man in his ragged clothes stood and looked at this traveler and said, "Wife, we have company. News of the world. Oh, do come in. Sit yourself here in our best seat, here by the stove. Warm yourself." And before he could even begin to talk and tell, the wife said, "Oh, would you care for something to eat or drink?" And as he was dusting himself off and warming himself by the stove, St. Nicholas looked up and said, "That's most kind." And she went to her cabinet and she got out a little black bread. And she went and got a tumbler of good fresh water from the town fountain and put it down before him. St. Nicholas looked at the food, looked at them, looked back and said, "Is this all you have?" And they said, "Yes, that's our common fare." And he smiled benignly and said, "Perchance I can help you out. Bring me a bowl and bring me a pitcher." Well, the poor man's wife wasted no time. She went where she had a bowl and brought it to him, and brought a pitcher and sat it before the traveler. And the blessed saint blessed the one and passed his hand over the other. Then he sat back and grabbed the bowl and said, "Bowl, be filled." And there from the bottom of the bowl up came a gravy and chunks and bits of meats, and it was a wonderful beef stew, just came filling all the way to the top. And when he got towards the top, he just placed his hand and said, "Bowl, be still." Then he went over to the pitcher and placed his hands on the side and said, "Pitcher, be filled." And there you could hear like water filling out from between the edges of rocks inside of there, and it foamed and frothed up with a wonderful, rich beer. And when it got to the top and the head rose a bit above, the good saint said, "Pitcher, be still." Well, they sat, they ate, they drank, and whenever need be, he would place his hands and call out and say what to do, and they would fill again, and they would continue to eat and drink. And the good peasant sat there and heard the news of the area and the town, and they had a wondrous good evening. It came time for him to sleep, and they said, "Oh, we have but a mattress on the floor, but please, it's for you." And they went and fixed a place for themselves and left the traveler rest. Well, after a good night's sleep, St. Nicholas got up, dressed, thanked them very much for their kindness, and said, "I leave you with a bowl and pitcher, so that you shall not know want." And off he jogged. A day went by, a week went by, then a fortnight, and then a month, and one day the rich brother, as I said, he's a bit of a curious fellow, was looking, and he mentioned to his wife that it seems that good fortune has fallen upon my brother. He's put on a few pounds. There's a little lightness to his step. He doesn't seem to be concerned. Wonder what that is. I'll just stop by. And so he wandered over to his brother's house and came in and sat down and talked about the weather and the fields and the crops and going on, and little by little and bit by bit he pulled out of him this whole story. Well, once he heard about this bowl and pitcher, he had to see it. He had to see it. It's too much to believe. So they brought out the bowl and the pitcher, and the poor brother went over and said, "Bowl be filled. Pitcher be filled." And as soon as the rich brother saw that, he was beside himself with envy. He says, "I have servants, I have workers, all these could be fed. This is but two here." And he had to have them. And so back and forth they went, and he asked for it, and finally a deal was reached, and the poor brother was poor, but no fool, and he said, "For silver coin, $100, I'll give you the bowl and the pitcher." So the deal was made, and the poor brother now had a sack of silver coin that he put behind the stove. And the rich brother took the bowl and the pitcher over to his house and put them up in a cabinet. The next morning, he said to his wife, "Instead of me going to the fields today and overseeing the workers, why don't you do something different? You go and watch the workers, and I shall set the lunch for everyone." Well, she wasted no time and went off to the field with the workers to sit and watch and see how things were going in the fields. And the rich brother just took a seat and sat down by the stove and got out his pipe and had a good smoke for the morning. for he knew there was very little to do. Well, come about noontime, the table was already set, and all he did was go and get the bowl and the pitcher and put them on the table. Now he had heard what his brother had said, and he went and put his hands on the bowl and said, "Bowl, be filled. Pitcher, be filled." And they each began to bubble and fill, and the scent was wonderful, and the sight of it was amazing. And then they filled, and then they came to the top, and then they started to spill over, and they covered the top of the table, and it began to run down the legs, and began to fill up the room, and pretty soon he's sloshing around, and he yelled, "Stop! Quit! Enough!" For in his hurry to get the bowl and the pitcher, he had never listened to the words of how to make it stop. And so as the room was filling, it was beginning to spill out over the threshold and go down the steps, and the dogs and the pigs of the town were coming and having a wonderful good time. He sloshed over to his brother and said, help me, please make these things stop." As I said, the poor brother was poor, but he was no fool. So he bided his time, and, "Oh, really? The problem is, and you want me to what?" And the long and short of it was that he negotiated another deal, and for another $100 worth of coin, he will retrieve and keep the bowl and pitcher. The rich brother was beside himself, but his home was going to be ruined, and he was looking like a fool, so he agreed. The deal was struck. He had his coin. He went over and got the pitcher and the bowl. "Bowl, be still. Pitcher, be still." And carried them back to his home. 2 sacks of coin and all the food and drink he can want. Life was good now for the poor brother. Day went past, week, a fortnight, a month, and several more months, and one day St. Nicholas and St. Christopher bumped into each other, and St. Christopher said, "Oh, I'm going for a little junket. I'm going to walk about on the earth." And St. Nicholas said, "Oh, should you find yourself between the rich and the poor brother's house, stop at the poor brother's. You will be well welcomed and fed. It will be a good time. Thank you." And off went St. Christopher, and sure enough, he walked about the earth and talked to people, and found himself there at the end of the day between the poor brother's house and the splendid home of the rich brother, with the gardens in the walk and a front door of well-hewn wood, and the top had stained glass so that it could open one way and the other. And he walked right over to the rich brother's house. Well, the rich brother just happened to be going by and threw the door open and said, "What? I'm busy." And St. Christopher said, "Oh, I'm a traveler." "Oh, another traveler. Someone who just wanders about and does nothing for this world, but look and talk and beg. Be gone." Boom! Shut the door. Dusted himself off, walked across the way, knocked at the door. The door was flung open. The poor brother goes, "Welcome. Oh, a guest. Come, we can provide." And brought him in and sat him down. They had a wonderful talk. They brought out the bowl and the pitcher, and they had a splendid meal, as you can imagine. Tales were told, and they spoke like old friends. Well, it came time for nightfall, and again they gave him their bed. And as they were preparing a little place for themselves, they noticed that St. Christopher, a peasant, took off his tunic, his top, and hung it on a nail. And as he lay down, the wife of the poor brother mentioned, "Oh, his top is so dirty and threadbare. I have a little material left." And they looked at each other and smiled. And she went, as he slept, and she took his shirt, his tunic, off a hook and brought it out and went and got what linen she had and unfolded it on their table and laid the shirt down and traced it. And all through the night she sat and worked till the last button was on. And as the sun was soon to rise, she went and hung that tunic, that shirt, back on the nail, the new one. Well, St. Christopher woke up, stretched a little bit, looked up, and saw this fine tunic. And he placed it on and was just, well, his heart was warmed. And he came out and thanked the woman very kindly. And he said, I really must be going now. Thank you so much for your kindness. And the poor brother said, wait. And he went behind the stove and he got his sack of silver coin and he went and he poured it out on the table. And he said, gentle traveler, take what you wish. I have more than I need. St. Christopher looked and scooped some of the coins into his hand and put it in his pocket. He got his staff, thanked them, and then as he was heading out the door, he said, I'd like to leave you with a blessing. And with no further comment, he turned to them and held his staff, and he said, whatsoever thou shalt begin to do in the morning, you shall continue all the day till the night. And off he trod. Well, the poor brother and his wife, they were simple, they were uneducated, and they're like, what does that mean? I don't know. What should we do? What do you think? I don't know. And back and forth they started to talk, and the wife finally said, well, while we're deciding this, I might as well begin to fold up what little linen I have left. And as she started to fold it, and she draw it back, there'd be more at the end, and she'd draw it up and fold, and draw it up and fold. And the husband, not even noticing yet, said, well, if you'll be doing that until we make a decision, I might as well put away the rest of my coins. And there he began to scoop his coins into his hand, but then there was more, and he scooped them up, and then there was more, and then his hands and his pockets were filled, and then cups and bowls and pillowcases and blankets, and there they had begun to do in the morning what they were to continue to do all the day till the night. Well, come sunset, the rich brother just happened to be going by the window, and there was a glint of color. He said, what's that? What in the world is going on? And he walked across the street and opened up the door, and there's a house full of linen and coins piled high. What? And the poor brother, well, what's the point of hiding the truth? And he explained to his brother what had happened. And the rich brother went, he was on my doorstep. Oh my gosh, look at the good fortune you've had. If they never come, if a traveler comes again, send them my way. I will be kind to them. I will be good. Do you promise? And the poor brother said, I do. But a day went by and a week, and a fortnight and a month, and several months and half a year, and then it was a year. And one day, St. Christopher and St. Nicholas bumped into each other, and they both had the same idea. It's time again to go travel. And they said, yes, and we do know where to stop. And so they went and they traveled about and did what good saints will do. And at the end of the day, found themselves between the rich brother and the poor brother's house. They dusted themselves a bit, looked at each other, and went right to the poor brother's home. They went and knocked at the door, and the poor brother welcomed them. And they said, we're here to stay and have some of your good hospitality and food. And the poor brother was a good, honest lad, and he said, but my brother has reformed. Please, he asked if travelers come again to go to his home, and he will provide for you. And they said, well, we'd like to say we've enjoyed our time with you, but very well. It is beautiful. And so across their way they went. Well, the rich brother had noticed them coming. He threw open the door and said, welcome, come to my home, servants. And he called out all kinds of orders, and they sat down and they had a meal, they had They had ham. They had all sorts of food and fruit and vegetables and desserts. Oh, that only my knees could have been under that table. What a wonderful meal they had. Then they were taken to a beautiful guest room with each their own separate bed. And the rich brother and his wife just waited and waited till they heard and thought they were asleep, and they went sneaking into the room and saw their tunics hanging on the hook, and they took them down, and she had their fine cambric linen laid out, and she and the servants worked and made new tops for them. Well, in the morning, they arose, saw the new shirt, smiled, thought this was very nice, and they came out and said, "Thank you very much. We must be moving on." And the rich brother ran and got his sack of coins and threw them out on the table and said, "Take what you wish, good travelers, for I have more than enough." They each scooped some coins into their hands, put them in their pocket, picked up their staves, started to walk out the door as the rich brother and his wife were wringing their hands, and they looked at each other and they turned. Each held up their staff and said, "We leave you with the same blessing as your brother. Whatsoever you shall begin to do in the morning, you shall continue to do all the day till night." And off they trod. Rich brother was so excited, he and his wife looked at each other. Now, as I said, contentment rested in that house, but envy in this, and he was not about to do just what his brother had done. He had to have a better idea. And he went and he rubbed his head as if to make it sharper, and he sat and he was thinking, and his wife was like, "Oh, if I have to be folding linen all day long, the pigs will not be fed, and I'd best go give them some work." And so she went out and got a bucket and filled it with water and threw it into the pig's trough. And there, by pouring water into the pig's trough, she had begun to do what she was going to continue to do all the day till night. And filling, and filling. Well, the rich brother was back, sitting and thinking and rubbing his head, and wondering, no, that won't do. Oh, well. And finally he's like, "Wife," and he looked and he saw her out the window. He saw what she was doing, and he was filled with rage. He ran out of the house and along the way picked up a willow switch and said, "Fool woman!" and slapped her across the shoulders with a willow branch. And there he had begun to do what he was going to continue to do all the day till night, and he hit, and he hit, and he whacked, and the little willow twig just broke into pieces, so there was nothing but threads and a little bit of bark on it, and he went whipping away, and they made such a fuss that all the neighbors and townfolk came out and laughed and watched as she bucketed water into the trough that filled over and just made mud. And there they continued all the day till nightfall. For you see, even the blessed saints cannot give wisdom to those that will have none of it. And why, just the other day, Tommy Fonts was telling me that there's people in this enlightened time and age that should they continue to do all the day what they started in the morning, would have done nothing better than pour water to pigs. And this is the meat of this big nut. And this is how the story ends. May God give us the wisdom and understanding to do well with our gifts. So at the end of the day, we're left with more than a trough of water. Thank you.